What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video, and this is gonna be a quick one since we got some news regarding some two comic book movies, both animated, both in a very similar animation style, thanks to Into the Spider-Verse, although Across the Spider-Verse is the sequel. But anyways, the trailer for Mutant Mayhem came out, so I'm gonna kind of do a little review of it, of what we got, and overall my opinions on the film. Well, not opinions on the film, but more where my excitement is for this movie. And we're also going to discuss the Rotten Tomatoes score and the box office projections for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse's opening weekend. And let's talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Rotten Tomatoes has been a very divisive thing as of late in the comic book movie community, or just the movie fandom in general, and that is whether what movie is going to be rotten and what movie is going to be fresh. And a lot of movies in the comic book movie space as of late has gotten a rotten score, whether we're talking Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, or Shazam 2, or Black Adam, which all deserved it, to be honest. But does that mean Rotten Tomatoes is always correct about the score? No, but we're going to break down what Rotten Tomatoes actually is, because I feel like a lot of people think Rotten Tomatoes nowadays is the definitive score. This is like the actual score that they gave the movie, but it's actually not what Rotten Tomatoes is at all. So as we see, Across the Spider-Verse probably has the best rating for a comic book movie of the whole decade, probably. I think it is higher than the Batman. I think the Batman was only in the late 80s. And this is higher than Guardians 3, which was also in the 80s, which are pretty good. 80 is not bad. And I feel like people's perception, because yes, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was consistently getting 90s or 80s. So when people see a movie like do an 80, they're so spoiled because they're so used to the movies consistently doing 90% that they think 80% is not a good thing. It's the same crowd that also probably believes that if your movie does not make $1 billion, you're a failure, without actually thinking of the budget of the movie, the target audience of the movie. Does the movie actually really need to make $1 billion, to be honest? Because a lot of movies in Hollywood that were considered blockbuster hits, not a lot of them made $1 billion, even if you adjust it for inflation. So, it's kind of a dumb argument to have that. But again, every movie is a different case scenario. And for Across the Spider-Verse, this is pretty good. I think it's only 1 or 2% off from the first movie. So obviously Across the Spider-Verse is good. It's in good graces. Some people are saying it's better than the first Into the Spider-Verse movie. Again, as I said for the Flash review, although it is good to have an insight of what people think about the movie, just have just what people are saying about the movie, think about it, and check out the movie for yourself and see if your opinion lines up with them, or if you kind of disagree with them, or if you have a higher opinion than they do about Across the Spider-Verse. So I would say that for any of the comic book movies, or any movie in general that comes out. Now, 96% people will be like, oh, okay, that's the grade they gave it. This is not Cinema Score. See, Cinema Score is like they test audiences and they see if they like the movie, and then boom, they're like, okay, we have a feeling about what most people like, that how most people felt about the movie, and whether the amount of people, you get an A cinema score, an A minus cinema score, a B cinema score, which is not great if you're a blockbuster movie, a B minus, which is even worse if you're a blockbuster movie, and some might be in the C plus range. If you're there, you're not really doing good, whether you're any type of movie. And so most comic book movies usually get an A, but, as of late, some of them have been getting Bs. I think Across the Spider-Verse might actually be the rare movie, depending on how audiences feel, to get an A plus, which is really good. Few movies have been able to do that, I think. So if Across the Spider-Verse pulls that off, that would be in a very rare club of movies. But Rotten Tomatoes kind of works the same way, where you have a bunch of critics, you average out what they felt about the movie, and the percentage is actually the amount of critics that approve of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So here, it's not that the movie is a 96%, it's that 96% of critics recommend Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, does that mean that every time for Rotten Tomatoes the critics are right? No. But that's how Rotten Tomatoes works. Because I feel like a lot of people in the movie fandom, they just talk out of their ass sometimes and they're like, oh man, like they don't understand what Rotten Tomatoes is, or they're just mad because a comic book movie gets a low score, and so they're like, you have to see the movie for yourselves. Like they get very defensive, but they don't understand that that's just the percentage of critics that recommend that movie. And they don't really look at what critics are saying. I'm not saying to agree with critics all the time. I'm not saying that critics are always right, but just to see what critics' gripes are with the movie and then check it out for themselves and see if they agree or disagree. I feel like that's the whole point of reviews and that's the whole point of critics. And yeah, sometimes critics get it very wrong or they misunderstand a movie like Mario, where in my opinion, if you're judging it as a film, the Super Mario Brothers movie is garbage. It's fucking awful. But if you are comparing it as a Mario experience of seeing these characters on the big screen for the first time, it's a pretty entertaining movie. It's a fun movie. You know, that's great for kids. It's nothing really offensive about it. So yeah, in some cases you're like, yes, it's not a great movie. In fact, it's probably a bad movie, but that's not the point of the Super Mario Brothers movie, and that's sometimes critics miss that, and that's true. So I think this whole we gotta go against the critics thing is getting a little out of hand sometimes, because I think people actually misunderstand what the point is of having critics there and movie reviewers. And also, I don't want to go against critics because even though we might heavily disagree on some takes, especially certain critics, I don't want anybody to really lose their whole job, because a lot of them, their whole job is reviewing movies. And so I wouldn't want anybody to lose their job unless they're just an awful person. But still, I'm like, I don't want people to lose their jobs. So yeah, I'm not going to be anti-critic. I'm just going to say I disagree with the critics on something, or I agree with the critics on this, or whatever. And as of late, I disagree with the critics with their Guardian score. I think Guardian should be way higher, but 80 is still good. It's not bad. And I agreed with the critics with Ant-Man and Shazam and the ratings they got. Well, not ratings, but the overall, the percentage that of critics recommended. I was like, yeah, it's around the 50s for me. I agree with most critics that didn't like Shazam or Ant-Man, but I agreed with a lot of critics that liked Guardian. So, you know, it's really at the end of the day the percentage rate. So I wanted to explain what Rotten Tomatoes was about, so a lot of you can now understand what Rotten Tomatoes is really there for. But at the same time, has a website, yeah, you know, like, you know, the high percentage of critics that recommended cuties, but they're not, yeah, just some of it's like like disgusting. If you still don't like Rotten Tomatoes has a website, that's perfectly fine. But I wanted to explain at least what Rotten Tomatoes is there for. But detour aside, the Across the Spider-Verse has a 96% Rotten Tomato score, and when we're looking at the box office, it's looking pretty good for the movie. It's going to be a little higher than Into the Spider-Verse, which is what we should expect, because a lot more people are excited for this film than the first movie, because not a lot of people really knew what the first movie was, and so there was the surprise factor of Into the Spider-Verse. But Into the Spider-Verse was in a crowded schedule. That's when you had Mary Poppins, Bumblebee, Aquaman. There was a lot of movies. And Into the Spider-Verse, unfortunately, was the one to be at the end of the pack. But now that people have seen Into the Spider-Verse, it's been like, I think 5 years at this point since Into the well, not 5 years since Spider-Verse came out, not yet, but there is a 5 year gap between Into the Spider-Verse release and now. And I feel like more people know what Spider-Verse is. They know what it is. Miles Morales has become one of the most popular Marvel superheroes. And so now they're more ready for Across the Spider-Verse. And here are the box office projections. Now, I'm not going to read all of them. I'm going to skim through it, but this is a Variety article. If you want to read the Variety article, I'll try to leave a link in the description below for what Variety said about the movie. But basically, they said the initial projections have Across the Spider-Verse bowing to 80 million. And I know what you're going to say. Whoa, for a comic book movie? That's pretty low. Not really. Not really. Because this is also an animated movie. And for an $80 million opening, That's pretty big for an animated movie, especially when you compare it to the first Into the Spider-Verse movie, which they say in this article only made $35 million. So, if this movie on the low end makes it 70 75, that's still great. That's still a significant improvement from the first movie. And if it makes 80, that's a significant improvement to the first movie. They even said that, but rival studios and I cannot read that word. Forgive me, but believe that the sequel has a chance of opening to 90 million or even higher. To hit or eclipse the mark, Across the Spider-Verse will need to broaden its appeal, not only attracting teenagers and adults, but under the age of 40, but also bring in families. And I think it's going to do that because a lot of kids, I'm not going to say like every kid, but a lot of kids, their favorite Spider-Man is Miles, or they just love Spider-Man. Miles doesn't have to be their favorite, but they love Spider-Man. So I think families are going to come out in force for Across the Spider-Verse. I would say, quote unquote, the only problem, but really, Across the Spider Verse is actually the movie that's gonna do damage for the family market, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that for The Little Mermaid, because The Little Mermaid came out a week earlier, which is also a family movie. It's Disney, and then now you have another family movie, but Spider Man, it's another black lead in Miles, going up against Little Mermaid. And so I think you're gonna take away a lot of that audience from Little Mermaid for Spider Verse, and I and part of that too, I didn't even watch The Little Mermaid, but my niece wanted to go see the movies, and I chose Spider Verse to be the movie that we're gonna go watch. Even though she is interested in Little Mermaid, but in terms of like the money I have or would want to take her out, I'm choosing Spider Verse, and she's more excited for Spider Verse anyways. So that's fine. And again, as I said, if this goes to 90 to 100 million, that's pretty good. And it's also about budgeting because the movie only cost 100 million. That's what they said. It relatively only cost 100 million to make. That's for how amazing the movie looks. That's amazing. That is a great budget to have. That's better because you're seeing a lot of these Pixar movies with over $200 million in their budget, and they're not performing that well. Strange World had $180 million in its budget, and it didn't do that well at the box office. And then you have Lightyear, which made back its budget, but just barely. It didn't even break even. Lightyear's break even point was 400 million. It didn't even break even. It grossed 224. So you have a lot of these Disney animated films and Pixar films that are $200 million in the budget, and they're not really making their money back. They're not really doing well at the box office. Compared to DreamWorks, where the budget for Puss in Boots was like maybe 80, 90 million, and they made over $400 million worldwide. That's amazing. You look at the Super Mario Brothers movie. It might be the more expensive of the Illumination movies. I think it's probably the first one to enter 100 million. Let me actually look that up. Let me see that. But we already know how much money the Super Mario Brothers movie made. It made over, it doesn't matter even if I find the budget, but it made over $1 billion. And yeah, Mario's budget is the same as Spider-Verse. It was 100 million in the budget, and it cost $1.27 billion worldwide. So for Spider-Verse to only be 100 million, the only break-even point is 200 million, and Spider-Verse is going to clear that. Spider-Verse is easily going to clear that. And so now everything else they're going to get is just profits, money. And I feel like Disney should maybe learn something from Spider-Verse and say, and these other animated movies that have been doing far better than them at the box office. I mean, also the quality of the movies are better. But like, well, I don't know about Mario. Mario wasn't that great. But yeah, Puss in Boots, the quality looks amazing for that movie. And it was a great movie. And Across the Spider-Verse looks amazing. And from the reviews, sound amazing. I think Disney should look at that and say, we are spending a little bit too much money on these. Like, it's animation. Sure, we need to give this the budget that's needed for these movies, but we might have to cut down on these budgets because we can't keep making these $200 million movies that don't even break even. That don't even break even. Or $200 million movies that we're just sending to Disney Plus. So I think Disney should look at these and say, damn, our animated movies should do better. our animated movies should be doing or performing as well as Spider-Verse. And when we're looking at the comic book movie opening weekends, if Across the Spider-Verse is going to be number 3 anyways. But if it is on the higher end of projections, it might be number 2, and it could be the number 1 opening potentially. But right now, Guardians 3 holds the biggest opening weekend for a comic book movie this year so far at 118 million. Ant-Man 3 comes in second place with 106 million, and Shazam 2 comes in at 30 million. And we're at the end of the year. I think we could compare how each movie did worldwide, but as of right now, in terms of openings, Spider-Verse can easily clear Shazam. In fact, I'm pretty confident it's going to clear Shazam. And matter of fact, it depends on how close it gets to Ant-Man 3's opening, or if it exceeds Ant-Man 3 and potentially Guardians 3 opening weekend. And if it does that, I mean, the movie already is going to be successful. The movie's already going to be successful. I think Sony knows they have a big hit on their hands. So they're going to be smart about it. But enough about the Spider-Verse talk. Spider-Verse isn't the only thing to drop some things here. Well, Spider-Verse isn't the only talk of the town today because Ninja Turtles, which is building off of the Spider-Verse style, is hoping to kind of, make its mark, and it dropped its second trailer. I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan. I love these characters. And when I first heard back in 2019 they were making an animated movie for Ninja Turtles, I was excited. 2007, we'll do a hot take game one day. But 2007, I think it's good, but it's overrated. It's overrated a little bit. But I was more open for a new theatrical Ninja Turtles movie. When I heard Seth Rogen the first time back in 2019, I was a little bit about it, but as of late, since that announcement, Seth Rogen has produced some great things like The Boys, which I've seen some of. I've seen some episodes. I've seen most of season 1. I didn't watch the other 2 seasons yet, but he's produced The Boys. If you're talking animation, he's produced Invincible. He's produced The Preacher Show. So not only is he good with comic book properties, the non-Marvel and DC kind, but he also proved himself in Invincible how great animation is. And I know my review of Invincible was all the way back in 2021, but my opinions on Invincible stays the same. It's still a fantastic show, the first season. And I can't wait for season 2 of Invincible. But yeah, Seth Rogen has proved himself as a producer that he knows what he's doing. So when after those projects, I'm like, okay, I believe more in Seth Rogen for Ninja Turtles. And then the first trailer dropped, and I loved it. It was simple. It was great. The second trailer here was pretty good. It gives us more of a story. And Superfly is the villain, who is voiced by Ice Cube. And we saw some of the other villains. It seems like Bebop, Rocksteady, Genghis Frog, I think his name is. But Mondo Gecko, Wingnut. Who is Post Malone playing? But we're getting those characters. They showed them. They didn't show Leatherhead, which is interesting. I think they also didn't show some of the other characters that was revealed. Like, we haven't seen any Baxter Stockman at all in the marketing. So I have a theory that is Superfly just the alter ego of Baxter Stockman, or did Baxter Stockman create him, or like, is there a connection, or is Superfly and Baxter Stockman just two unrelated characters? So that's interesting. But yeah, we did get our first look at Superfly. As you see, there seems to be a mutant task force that hunts down mutants, because we see in one of the shots I'm showing right now that they do capture the turtles, it seems like. And we get to see our first look of Splinter in this movie. And, I kind of did see some concept art. It was leaked. I'm not going to say where, but I did see that earlier. And seeing it in animation, I actually like it. I mean, I like the design, but I really like Splinter in this. They have the whole, you rat us out, Leo. I think the personality of the turtles are nailed perfectly. I think Splinter summarized the turtles very well in this trailer. Michelangelo is the heart, Donatello is the wisdom, Leonardo is the honor, and then Raphael's the bravery, and they nail that so perfectly. I think he got all the Turtles' personalities down, which has me even more confident at Seth Rogen and the directing team, because I think it's the directors that did Mitchells versus the Machines, and that was a pretty good movie. So I am very confident, and I'm that this could be good, and I'm very excited for this movie. They have their own variation of the turtle van at the end that Donatello is driving, it seems like. So we're gonna get the turtle van or whatever they call it this time, or the party wagon or whatever they want to call it. But the turtles do have their own variation of it. We got to see more April, and although I mean, again, I know a lot of people hated her design. And although I'm not the biggest of her design, it's not because of her skin color. I feel like the people that are mad about her design because of her skin color are weirdos. But I feel like, yeah, the design was whatever. But, I'm starting to get used to it. It's not bad, like I said. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite design out of everything we saw of the characters. But April seems great here. I like the whole journalism thing she has and how she's been like trying to find Superfly forever. Well, not forever, but like there's this whole mystery of who is Superfly. But again, because we didn't see any Baxter Stockman, it's having me feel like Superfly and Baxter Stockman's gonna have some type of connection. They do also show some other mutants being created in a tube somewhere. And basically, Superfly's main objective is that he's gonna mutate the whole city into mutants, and that mutants are going to take over New York because humans don't respect mutants. And I feel like there is going to be kind of that theme of human prejudice against mutants. And the more I thought about it, I was like, oh man, this is what TMNT Out of the Shadows, the Michael Bay produced movie, the second one, was trying to do. It was trying to do mutants versus human and the prejudice that humans have over mutants. And I was like, but in that movie, it was boggled down by other stuff that made it terrible. Like when I was younger, I loved that movie, but when I rewatched it more recently, on the build to the rise of the TMNT movie, which don't worry, we're gonna do when we get to Mutant Mayhem, there will be overviews of the Ninja Turtles movies. But that movie, I think, kind of ended up being a little bit lower on my rankings because I liked the message that it was trying to do. And I think it could work for a Ninja Turtles movie, but I didn't think Out of the Shadows did it that well. I think it was kind of rushed and it was forcing a lot of, it was trying to do too many storylines at once. It failed miserably. And I think no, I was about to say Out of the Shadows, but I think Mutant Mayhem is going to do the same topic, but I think it's going to do it way better than the Michael Bay movie. And I can already tell from the trailer, like how the turtles are talking to each other about it. And also, there is no Zero to turn them human that they fight over. And so I feel like it's about accepting yourself. Like the turtles clearly want to be accepted by the people up above ground, but I feel like the journey they're gonna go through this movie is that they're gonna accept themselves and love themselves. So yeah, overall, everything I saw for the Mutant Mayhem trailer looks great, and that's all the news we have so far. But later on, my MCU Spider-Man overview video is gonna be coming out, so get ready for that. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.